I will call the February 19, 2018 City Council meeting to order. Call the roll.
John Hawkins.
Here.
Matt McKinney. Brian Miller.
Here.
Jim Talbot. Logan Welch.
Here.
Call for motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
With those
With the removal of number 2 is presentation by Jane Adams, Director of YSSS, and we'll also have to remove number 10. There's a council memorandum resolution accepting and approving the minor subdivision plat of Size, 2nd edition in Webster City, Iowa.
I move to approve of those amendments.
Second. Are you moving 11 up?
Well, we can just do that. That's fine. Can I?
Yeah,
We're going to move 11 up to number 2, so that Chuck can get to his game. So, anyway,
Okay. Brian, you seconded, right?
Yep.
all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Section A, petitions, communications and requests. This is the time of the meeting that a citizen may address the council on a matter not on the agenda. Except in cases of emergency, the City Council will not take any action at this meeting, but may ask City staff to research the matter or have the matter placed on the agenda for a future meeting. Well, not too many people here tonight. So. I have a proclamation to read for the 50th anniversary of Home Rule, local control to cities in Iowa. It is whereas Home Rule is essential to effective and responsive municipal governance in Iowa and provides flexibility to make decisions at the local level, where decisions are made closest to the people they impact and can be tailored to fit local conditions, needs, concerns in order to better serve taxpayers. And whereas the City of Webster City supports Home Rule and the powers it provides to make local decisions that best reflect the residents of our community, and whereas the citizens of Iowa approved the adoption of Home Rule in a Constitution of Iowa on November 5th, 1968, which guaranteed local control to cities, and whereas this is the 50th year of municipal Home Rule in Iowa, Home Rule continues to be vital to the health and prosperity of all cities in Iowa. Therefore, I, John Hawkins, Mayor of the City of Webster City, do hereby recognise the 50th anniversary of municipal Home Rule in Iowa, proudly support its continued authority. Thank you. Okay. B is minutes and claims. The following items have been deemed to be non-controversial routine actions to be approved by the council in a single motion. If a council member or a member of the audience wishes to have an item removed from this list, it will be considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. We have minutes of February 5th and February 12th, 2018. Number 2 is a resolution on payroll for period ending February 3rd, 2018 and paid on February 9th, 2018. And 3 is a resolution on bills in the funds list.
Move to approve 1 through 3 collectively.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Next section is C, the general agenda. Item 1 on the agenda is at 5:35 p.m. is the time for a public hearing on the proposed purchase agreement of city-owned property located in Dubuque and Pacific Railway Edition, Webster City, Iowa. I will open the hearing. Are there any written objections?
No written objections?
Are there any oral objections?
No oral objections?
I will close the hearing. Call on Daniel. Do you want to?
Sure. This agenda item is the public hearing, and the agenda item is for an offer to purchase a city-owned lot currently adjacent to the Hy-Vee lot and directly behind Godfather's Pizza along Prospect Street. If the screen will come up, I'll show you. There you go. So it'd be this this square piece here, part of the sale of the agreement, the city has a vacated right-of-way, which was originally platted as Third Street. That right-of-way was never developed. The developer, One Site Development, is hoping to develop a retail, 9,000 square foot retail shopping store on the parcel, and has requested as part of the purchase agreement an access easement for the use of their site plans. Here's a layout of how that site plan would encompass. The parking lot and the structure would remain on the lot they're purchasing. They would use part of the right-of-way for access in and out of the parking lot, as well as for their delivery trucks to back into the side of the building. So this is a preliminary concept or site concept with some details still having to be worked out. But part of the purchase agreement for $75,000 is requesting of that access agreement for them to incorporate that right-of-way in their plans.
That grassy area right to the west, is that Hy-Vee's property then?
Correct. So everything to the west here, to the left of this, is Hy-Vee's parcel.
Well, it's a good use for the land anyway. Okay. Anyone have any questions? Call for a motion on the resolution authorising and approving execution of a contract for sale and purchase and access easement agreement between the City of Webster City and One Site Development LLC, an Iowa company.
So moved. Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Item 11 on the agenda is council memorandum resolution authorising fire chief to execute a mutual aid fire and emergency services response agreement in the surrounding Hamilton County, Iowa. Chuck, did you want to?
Thank you, Mayor, council members. I appreciate your time on this. One of the biggest things that most of the communities in the state of Iowa have need for is mutual aid agreements with volunteer and full-time departments. With budgets and everything, we just can't seem to do it without each other. So it's a very important factor. We've done it for years, being good neighbors to all of our communities that we're next to. A lot of that we see, in addition to going on calls, is also being invited to training events. I know Stratford's invited us to all of their annual training events this year. It makes it difficult the further, obviously, a department is from us, but I know that we've had some of our borderline departments come and do some of the house burns with us, and we'll continue to have trainings together. So it's just about being good neighbors. We've done it for years, but we want to formally, again, just make sure that that's okay with all of you. Any questions on the mutual aid agreement? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Enjoy the game. You leaving? You going there?
Yes, sir.
You can go. That's fine, thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Okay, call for motion.
So moved. Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Thanks, Chuck. Item 3 is a continued discussion on the Hamilton County Animal Advocates TNR program topic. The organisation's additional information included in the packet. They will not be here tonight. They won't be here due to schedule conflicts and the weather.
Right, so like tonight, are we kind of discussing what direction we want to go with this? If we want to open up the ordinance, if we want to entertain a pilot program, or?
That's pretty well where we're at, whether we're gonna have a pilot program, whether we're gonna open up the, this is the way I see it, so.
And I remember talking about it, you know, when they originally came and presented what TNR is, and I feel that even with a pilot program, I don't think we can, in good faith, be able to allow it without some ordinance changing, just because of how the R works in TNR, the return part, and the public caregivers. I think that how they word it in the sample ordinance wording is community cat caregiver. Right now, that role would be illegal. So, you know, where I'm at on this, I think it'd be beneficial to helping control our cat population. Again, it's not, they even claim and state that it's not a perfect solution, but it's better than doing nothing.
What did you think of their language that they gave us?
I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I can write the ordinance however you guys want it to be written, so it doesn't bother me personally either way. I think my only concern has always been, obviously changing the ordinance, that it's done properly and that it's done, that everybody is comfortable with the language. But the other thing too has always been enforcement. It always ends up either in our office or the police department's office of enforcement of this, and just how that would look if we're allowing someone to be a community cat caretaker or caregiver is what they call them. And they're in this program. How do they stay in the program? What happens if that person passes away or decides they no longer want these cats? Where do they go? How do we get the police department involved enough to know that this person is allowed to have these cats because they're a community cat caregiver? Is it some sort of a licensing or how that looks? Is it unlimited amount if the person is allowed to have an infinite amount of cats? What happens when this entity, Hamilton County Animal Advocates, is somehow disbands, in the future, or changes or evolves or whatnot? Who's going to take over that role? Once they're gone, and we no longer have a TNR, are we just going to allow anybody to have cats back again, or be feeding them at least? That's my concern, I guess. It's not as easy as just changing ordinance, unfortunately. There's a lot that has to go into it, thought-wise, that just off the top of my head that's coming up.
But, that's what my issue with it is if we change the ordinance, and that's a permanent, pretty well, you would like to change ordinances that they're going to last a long time. And that's the question at the moment is, are they going to be around for a long time? I mean, we don't know that for sure. And they asked to give it a tryout. And I guess I understand what you're saying about the, what do we do here about the, there are obvious things that you're not supposed to do according to our ordinance. But then it is a little like when the police see me driving down the road and I'm doing 3 miles an hour with the speed limit, they're not pulling me out and booking me for speeding because they're giving me a bit of a leeway, or they're not really looking out for me because don't look to be excessive, so they're leaving it go. So I'm not sure that, is that I don't know if that's a right way of looking at it, but there is a similar sort of thing. We're not out looking for cat caregivers every day, or whether people are feeding cats or not, or whatever. So I would think it'd be a bit for somebody to get into trouble doing this, wouldn't you think? But of course, sure. You don't know.
It's the whole feeding, I think, is the issue. End of the day, if you say it's an ordinance that they're not allowed to feed, and the police receive a complaint that somebody's feeding them, that's one thing, versus there's nothing in our ordinance right now about trapping, neutering, and releasing. I don't have from a legal standpoint, I don't have an issue with if they wanted to do the program. It's just when you get to the feeding aspect that you get into an issue.
Yeah.
So currently right now they would be allowed to trap, neuter, and release, no questions asked. But it's once you start feeding them, they're in violation. I'm never a huge fan of turning a blind eye, because that's what we got ordinances for. And I can't say
you as in your job, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's my job to always. But again, and my other concern is with changing ordinances is once you change it and then you allow it, and then you turn around and say in 2 years something else changes, a new council comes on, whatever the situation is, and you turn around and you disallow it again. That window, now those individuals are grandfathered in, and it's a little different than, say, we change a fence ordinance, and now that person's non-conforming, but they still have the fence. Well, we know that fence, and we know it's non-conforming, and we keep an eye on it. It's impossible to keep an eye on somebody who's had cats, because we don't track every cat that they have. And so, you can no longer enforce it on that person regardless of what cats they feed. I mean, they're essentially allowed to feed forever, if you were to ever change it, and again, that's your guys' call.
Would that be the situation though? Because I mean, technically, if a new council came in and took out the TNR program, the name caregivers would no longer be a thing. The program would not be a thing to I don't know, you'd call it allow or make concessions for. So,
But if you've allowed somebody to become a community caregiver, and you give them that title, and you let them, however you authorize them, if it's licensing or whatever it is, and then you've now taken it away, they're essentially non-conforming. They're not. It's like almost like they're grandfathered in a sense, if you think about it that way, because they're not gonna just abandon all these cats all of a sudden and stop feeding them because, you know, just because we changed the rules. I mean, that would be somewhat.
Right.
Inhumane.
And we're not gonna
So
keep
then-
track of our 20 cats.
So then we gotta know when those 20 cats die, so that we know when they're not grandfathered in anymore.
Right. I mean, that's my, again, yeah, I suppose you could say no longer feeding cats, but I just imagine the backlash that you guys would get as far as.
well, we say that today,
Right.
you know, and there are people that are doing it today. And
Which,
I'm the
which is,
same way. I'm
which
not-
is why I don't know that, you know, which is why I think people are doing it right now, and it's happening right now. And no one's getting hauled in, so I think that if we let them do their test thing and without changing it, and then if it
Right.
looks like it's working or we start getting some hassles, then we can go on and look at changing the ordinance.
And by no means am I trying to slow, I mean, again, I'm the same way. I'm not a big fan of having ordinances if we're not gonna obey them or enforce them. Again, I just don't want, I'm doing this to protect the Hamilton County advocates and the caregivers more than I am anything. You know, I want them to have a free runway to go with this program without any outside input, trying to curb it and stop it by calling out feeding of cats and stuff because of a pilot program. So if we feel we can successfully run a pilot program to a point where we're going to be able to actually obtain some data, which may take a year, you know, may take a large amount of time, then I'm all for it. Don't get me wrong. I would hate for that to start to snowball and then be thrown out because of community members not wanting to play nice with us, giving them some leeway to do a pilot program. Is the only reason I'd want to change the ordinance at this point. So that said, I mean, if we feel we can give them a large amount of time without having to change the ordinance to really run with this and see if they can make numbers reduce, I'm fine not changing the ordinance at this point.
They did this in Stratford too, right? And that didn't require an ordinance change.
Well, they
from my
didn't have the
understanding.
wording. Their ordinance.
Their ordinance doesn't say anything about feeding.
Right, so they didn't have to get around it.
Typically, like other communities, Stratford, Woolstock, I mean, just 200%. A lot of communities that are around us, they'll actually adopt whatever we do, but they just never have when it came to animals. And they left it. Because I mean, ours is still pretty new actually, if you think about it. It was done in 2015, so for ordinance wise, it's still fairly new in the world of ordinances. So yeah, that's why they were allowed to, because there's nothing against them feeding cats as it is.
What do you think, Brian?
And to me, the whole thing to me is the return part. Having to return it to somebody who is essentially gonna take care of it in some manner just doesn't fall in our ordinance. And, to me, it would be easier for them to change their policy, return to the neighborhood they caught it in, whatever it may be. It's just like some other things that have came across the council in the past where it wasn't an issue until it became an issue, and that's what this would do, is make it an issue and put somebody
Are you talking?
in our headlights as far as breaking an ordinance.
Are your suggestion is the TNR process to be tweaked a little? And see, I kind of did some research on this just because when they came to me, I was completely naive to the process. Before, 2 months ago, I had no idea what TNR meant. And the R is the most important part. Trapping and neutering them is just basically a way to track them and obviously keep them from reproducing. The returning part is keeping others that have not been trapped and neutered yet from taking a spot in the pack, if you will, or in a herd, or whatever they call them. So it's when you kind of dissipate cats all over the place, others come in and take their spot. So you know.
I understand that, and what I'm saying is if they catch 10 cats on Nancy Lane, they do their trap and neuter, and then they release them on Nancy Lane. Not release them to somebody to care for them, or feed them, or whatever. The whole point is these are wild cats and they're gonna find, I mean, however they're eating now, they're gonna find that way, whether it's, mice or rabbits or some little old lady feeding them, they're gonna find a way.
Right, and that's my point.
And the whole our point is what makes it the issue.
That's my point. They will find somebody who's feeding them. And if you trap 10 cats on Nancy Lane, there's somebody feeding them already, because that's where they're there. So I don't think that'll reduce numbers, is what I'm saying.
Well, it'll reduce the numbers if they
Generationally.
or whatever,
Right.
but, you know, and that's obviously, I know what you're saying is then you're not releasing them to somebody, which means that you
Right.
haven't put
The whole
somebody in
releasing them
hot
to
seat,
is the
except
issue.
that- Except that they won't release the cat's just been neutered or whatever, and now it has to be taken care of for a certain time, so you can't just, somebody has to be taking care of them, so. And I'm sure they're not taking all these cats and keeping them themselves for X amount of time.
So the question I guess I would pose is, do we want to allow TNR in Webster City? And maybe we should solve that problem first, and then we figure out how we go about it.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with doing the program. I mean, you know, I've seen the other side of it. There is as much information out there that's saying that TNR doesn't work as there does work. But trying nothing, I guess, is, you know, at least trying this might work. So who knows?
I know this agenda item is just a discussion.
Hmm.
Do we want to give any direction to the Hamilton County advocates from this discussion? Like,
Well, we could kick it down until we got more members here if you want, or we can decide whether we want to allow them to start doing something, or we can put the ordinance. I guess it's, what were you thinking, Brian?
I just don't see it, as it stands now, the way they do it, I don't see it fitting in their ordinance, and I'm not necessarily inclined to change the ordinance because of all the things Zach stated, you know. I just see it causing potential problems on many different levels. I like the trap and neuter part, just not the return part.
Maybe I'm guessing you're liking the trap neuter in return, just not the feeding part.
Yeah. Not the,
Because that's ultimately the question you guys have to decide is if you want to allow feeding or not, because as stated the last time when Monica was here, they want, I mean, their thing is the caretaking afterwards. It's not, if you say trap neuter release period, we're not gonna change the ordinance, you can probably guess what they're gonna say is, okay, that's fine, but we're not gonna handle the program because that's not what their 503 set up for. So that's probably the real question, because if you're just gonna kick it down the road and you don't discuss if you're gonna allow feeding or not, you're gonna talk to them and they're gonna say, okay, we'll do the TNR, but we wanna be able to feed, so you're not gonna solve anything unless you probably figure that one out first.
so we're kind of fighting with ourselves, because the reason we have an issue with this is because our ordinance is stricter than most with the feeding issue. Maybe not surrounding communities.
Yeah.
So we're fighting with ourselves on this. If they get the green light to do this, they're gonna be able to apply for grants. They're gonna be able to self-fund. They're not asking for any money, they're asking to be allowed to do this tried program around the nation that has funding behind it and success stories all over the country, without a dollar of our funding except time and your time, possible ordinance redrafting. So I guess we're kind of focusing on some of the negative aspects, like, yeah, there might be some bad apples that ruin the program for others if we don't change the ordinance. If we change the ordinance, there may be some hypothetical issues in the future, like grandfathering in of care providers. But all in all, we're kind of missing the bigger point. We have a group of community volunteers wanting to take some action on a growing cat issue in Webster City, self-funded. And that's what I want to support. There are some hypotheticals, yes, and I want to be aware of that and conscious of them, but again, I think right now we have in front of us something that in the past, we've begged for people to step up and take charge of some issues, and we have that group now, and I just wanna help them. So I mean, I've spoken enough, I guess,
So
again,
you're,
I'll pose that question again, do we wanna allow TNR in Webster City?
It would have to be, how would we restructure the ordinance to accommodate it? If we would be.
Well, if we're gonna allow it, then we have to change the ordinance, it's basically what it is.
Yeah, I don't see any way to do it. As the rules stand, I don't see a way to do it.
I agree.
Yeah, there's a way to do TNR, there's just not a way to continually take care of them in the future, that's, for this group. Yeah, I mean, you could, if the city wanted to say they wanted to do TNR, they could do it. The trapping and the neutering and the ear tipping, but they can't. And it would still fall within the ordinance of not allowing the feeding, but for this organization, obviously they want the feeding aspect too, so.
Need someone who has a bit of land around their house to be able to do that.
Yeah, I got cats.
Live out the west side of town.
I got
Is that where you're
Wall
thinking?
Street's a good area.
surprised that I don't have any mice in my house, I don't understand that.
Well, we've been provided examples of ordinance changes that would,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming you reviewed those.
Yeah.
And does anything like stand out in those suggestions that are just out of line with what fits for Webster City, or?
I mean, there was, yeah, I mean, again, it comes back to, again, that's where I feel like I'm a broken record in the sense I keep saying, if the major decision is feeding, because that obviously has been taken out. The steps on TNR that they talk about, 85.25, I don't have an issue with, if you're going to allow it. The other, I mean, like when you talk about reclaiming impounded cats, right now, currently, the way it's set up is any animal, not just a cat, but any animal gets picked up and goes to the vet clinic. The city then pays the vet for impound fee, any shots, anything like that it needs while it's in there, food, all that, and then we try to collect back. With this, it talks about community cat caregivers are empowered to reclaim the impounded community cats without proof of ownership solely for the purpose of carrying out TNR and for returning your tip community cats to original location, but it doesn't address who pays the fee, and the city would then most likely be on the hook for that, so these cats you have one neighbor who still doesn't like the program and starts trapping these cats and then taking them out to the vet or whatnot, and then now they're impounded, who pays that fee? That was the one thing I was concerned about just with that, I mean, but everything else, like I said, if you're going to allow this program, then obviously, like their ordinance change says, it would take out the feeding portion, and then it would add in a lengthy section about what the TNR program is, so.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's to decide whether we're gonna do it today or not. Or we're gonna kick it down until there's more people, more members here.
Well,
Do you think the easiest way would be to, with what you've discussed, have Zach draft an ordinance change and then have that on the agenda to be voted on?
well, I mean,
Or-
I mean, please, other council members, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel there's some hesitance to change the ordinance at this point. And again, that's why I just wanna pose that question, do we wanna allow this either in a pilot form or in a full-fledged rollout for Webster City? And I think that would be the first step to kinda get crystal clear if we wanna do this, and then we can start working towards a solution.
So is it better to relay back to advocates and tell them here's parameters in which the city would be willing to consider?
Parameters being,
That obviously the feeding of the cats would be an issue. And so if that's gonna be an issue, for them it's a done deal, then we don't have to spend any more staff time or working with them and trying to figure out a solution if there's not gonna be one.
that's what I'm trying to figure out now, what is the consensus? Is the feeding an issue? I mean, are we against changing the ordinance? Cause again, we're fighting ourselves on that. We put that in there, we can take it out, you know, it's, and I still don't have a clear answer, like, or would we like to move forward with TNR as it's been tried in other communities? Then we may have to change that ordinance, and that's where I'm just not
So-
sure what the consensus is.
So if the main part of our deal is the feeding of the cats, okay, so if we were just to take that out of our ordinance and not put all that other stuff in there, isn't that a better thing than with all the extra language they've got where they can go and take possession of cats and all that sort of stuff, so then we don't cross that bridge where we got.
Then how do you stop somebody who's feeding 20 cats and doesn't want to be a part of the TNR program?
Well, then that's,
Right, I mean, right, and the other thing is I would probably, just for clarification's sake, personally, I would like to see, if that's the route you wanna go, not only taking out the feeding the feral cat language, but also adding some TNR parameters, so because right now there's questions as to whether you can even trap in town, for example. So I'd wanna make sure we had that.
yeah. Well, I think I'd like you to look at the ordinance and we'll see that's what I think. We should go ahead and at least look at the ordinance and see whether there's something we can get it to work.
I agree. I'm on the same side of that.
So you want me to draft an ordinance that takes out the language of the feeding and present it, or do you want?
Well, I want you to
Like Dan
present it
said,
in a way that the TNR is acceptable to feeding, but not people who aren't part of the TNR can't feed it.
Now, when you say,
Possible, isn't it?
I mean, it's, I mean, anything's possible, but I do understand what I'm saying now is, how do we monitor, that was my original.
Well, you can't, I mean, it's how do you we don't monitor any of it at the
Right,
moment.
right
So
now-
we don't, so it's not really that big an issue.
But you're saying, but you're making a monitoring step when you say, you can't feed if you're not part of the TNR program. Now we have to somehow monitor who is part of the TNR program.
Well,
So either- I mean, the
I
option
think
is-
then it's up to the TNR people to tell us who is members of
Why would,
who's the members of your TNR group.
Yeah, it almost like when the Hamilton County Advocates, I guess, identify a neighborhood they want to target. I think it'd almost be a good idea for them to sit down with the city and be like, "Hey, we're naming this person at this address as our spearhead, our caregiver for that." So we're in the know before the neighborhood's even tackled with this issue. I could see that being. I didn't read that in here where like the city is at all involved in picking that caregiver or being at least be made aware prior to them becoming it. So that might be an issue, but I think a lot of what they've presented is relevant. I think some of it needs to stay. You're right, but again, if we just take the feeding of cats out, that's fine. But to allow them to trap and snip ears and stuff,
Right.
they probably we should deem that part of the TNR program. So maybe that's what we do. Maybe we see what Zach can present us that's a good fit, maybe with some concessions made off of the recommendation, and some things that you've thought and bother you that may be an issue in the future, and just see what we got. And then again, we sit down with TNR and say, will this work? Or with Hamilton County Advocates, I should say.
I would love to see, and to me the easiest solution is them changing the R side of things on their end. We wouldn't have to do anything then. They'd release to the neighborhood they caught the cat in, not to somebody
Well,
else.
the trouble is, we know there's people feeding them, which means it's only a matter of time, I guess, before the police pick somebody up.
so what would happen under,
But then we're still protected because we're in the ordinance. If there's somebody feeding 20 cats, they're against the ordinance.
so what would happen under the advocates, or if they have a community caregiver and that community caregiver moves away or passes on? How do we address that situation at that point then?
Well, I mean, we'd probably have to have a backup in that neighborhood named. Maybe there's
I
a.
guess that's a question for us to give to the TNR people, isn't it?
They would know better than I. Again, I've
Yeah, because
become an educator on this a couple months ago, but this system is vetted in a sense. It shows results. It's showed results in just a town south of us.
Yeah,
so I
but-
would hate to tweak the formula because it doesn't fit an ordinance that we have the ability to tweak.
But the system they presented, and they made it clear when I brought up the ordinance from Perry and Panora, and they specifically said that they didn't like that ordinance.
They didn't like their wording.
Right.
This is not the same.
No, but because I pointed out that in Perry and Panora, they still outlawed the feeding of feral cats. That
Unless
was-
you belong to the TNR program, and that's what they want to get rid of, and we could change that.
But they didn't have, I guess, their system implies specifying a caregiver, specifying a residence or a residence, whereas with Perry and Panora, theirs is broader, more so referring to what Brian's example of having a colony, established colony, versus an actual person to be responsible for it. That's the key difference in terms of what they're presenting and what every other TNR community has done. And so there are slight differences in terms of how that can be enforced, the consequences in terms of how we administer that.
And Zach may present something that's unique to any community, unique to Webster City, that fits for us. But I would like to move forward with changing the ordinance to allow trap, neuter, return in Webster City.
Yeah, because I think at the, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I think at the end of the day, ultimately though, you guys have to decide whether you want to allow the feeding of wild animals in town or not. Because I can't go anywhere without at least that, because if not, I can run a million different directions on this whole deal. Because just sitting here now, my thought is, so they're a community cat caretaker, right? These advocates come in one time, they trap, let's say they trap, neuter, release back to this person, and are we going to monitor them in the sense of them having to come back frequently to continue to trap, neuter, and release at this area? Because if somebody's putting out a food bowl out in the back, it's not just gonna be the 9 neighborhood cats, they're gonna bring in more, or are they gonna keep coming back? And, or is it just they come once and then that person has then got free reign forever to continue to feed? And the easy answer to that is if you're going to allow feeding, then yeah, then it solves itself. We don't care in a sense of if you're going to allow feeding, then what they have is fine in the sense of let them, if they come once or they come 100 times, we don't care because you're still allowed to feed. If you're concerned, I mean,
But shouldn't maybe you're only allowed to feed a cat that's had its ear?
but how do you monitor? Because how are you gonna know that? So the police are gonna show up at the house and say, well, you have
There's one
4
that isn't.
kids, 4 cats over here without their ears nipped, so that's 4 tickets. I mean, see what I'm saying? It's impossible. The end of the day, it's either you want to allow feeding or you don't want to allow feeding. If you say, I don't care, then it's easy. We can get an ordinance that allows TNR. If you say, we want TNR, but we don't want to allow feeding, then it's gonna look more like what Perry has, where it says, can't feed feral animals, but you're allowed to TNR in the sense of you're allowed to trap.
If that's what works in Perry, then why don't we do it?
We don't know if it works in Perry. We haven't had the conversations with Perry to see if they think it's effective or not. I mean,
To me, when you word it, do we want to allow the feeding of wild animals in Webster City? No. Do I want people feeding deer and have 100 deer around
okay,
town?
do you want to feed cats? I mean, I guess that's, because you're gonna feed squirrels and you're gonna feed birds. And do you want to,
Should you be feeding squirrels?
I don't feed squirrels, I don't feed any animals. I trick out all the trees. I want grass and that's it.
All right.
I think we got a consensus, so I think we
Okay.
would like to look at the ordinance
Yeah.
to allow TNR, is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I'm getting at. I can look at the ordinance and I can draft it all day, but I need to know, the consensus needs to be whether you just want to allow the feeding or not, so that I can draft it without, because if not, we're gonna keep spinning our wheels, we're not gonna answer that question. I can run it a million different ways. I can run one without allowing the feeding, similar to Perry. I could run one with, you say, we're gonna take the feeding language out, and it would be similar to theirs. I can present both of them, you guys can look at them that way and decide then. I don't care either way.
So Perry has a TNR, but they're not allowing feeding.
Exactly.
Okay. So then maybe that's the way we should look at it.
And theirs is partnered or is in conjunction, and it's spelled out in the ordinance. It's tied to the Humane Society of Perry. So it's spelled out in their ordinance.
But again, you have to, then in that situation, you have to have a humane side that wants to take on that program, which we don't, obviously. So you can add it, but if no one's gonna actually handle the program, then what's the point of changing the
If we're
rules?
gonna, from my understanding.
Well, we
from
have
them-
somebody who's gonna organize the program.
But I'm saying, if they're not comfortable with the language of, if you, like Perry says, no, you can't feed them, but we're gonna have TNR, and then they have somebody that handles that, right? If we say the same thing here, and they say, we don't wanna do it because we wanna allow the feeding, well, now you don't have the program.
Then we don't have a program, yeah.
Right, and that's what I mean, I can draft it.
So to me, if that's the truth, it's a waste of Zach's time. It's easier to talk to them and say, if we do it this route and don't allow feeding, are you willing to accommodate that change?
Well, we can go back and
And
ask
if
them
not-
first. I think that's probably,
If they are, then
Have you been
Zach
talking
can
to
do
them?
some work.
Yeah,
you wanna see if that's something that they can work with.
well, I think they've already made that apparent that that's a big key part of the program.
And I asked her
Right.
the last time Monica was here, I
Right.
point blank asked her.
And I'd be happy to talk to you, don't get me wrong, it just, I fear that if we do change the ordinance and don't allow the return part of TNR, then I would hate for, again, a nonprofit, self-funded group of volunteers not being able to do what they do because of our reluctantness to allow them to do it, but.
But there's a, right there on the boards though.
Yeah, that's
an
very,
ordinance
that's.
that allows TNR and they don't allow feeding.
Yeah, I mean, so if they're doing it, that's great, and maybe we talk to Perry, not Hamilton County Advocates, you know, they're Humane Society, and see what types of numbers of reduction they've been able to do with that modification. And again, and I'd hate for, you know, the Hamilton County Advocates not to be able to apply for grants because of.
Well, if we've said that they can do their TNA program, but, I mean, the feeding of it's what it is. I mean, most of these cats are capable of feeding themselves, these wild ones, no doubt. Well, I'd be interested to know what the Perry, whether that Perry thing would work, so I guess it's worth asking them if they can work with that sort of language. We can get the language for them and we can see whether it's something they can work with or not.
Yeah, I'd say,
And then we can meet again next time with it and go from there. Because we're not, you know, we don't have to finalise it tonight, so. I'm sure it's still early days for them to, this time of the year. It's probably not something they're going to start just yet anyway. And if we're going to change the agenda, well, that's going to take a month or more anyway, so.
Yeah, 3 readings.
Alright.
so what's the consensus? Where would we, like, what's the next step?
That we'd like to try, I'd like to try it, but I'm concerned about the feeding side of it, so I would like to see if we could adopt what Perry has rather than having it wide open like that.
And if Advocates is willing to follow in line with that.
So then I say that the next council meeting, bring your draft following that consensus, and we invite advocates to the table to discuss this, hear them out, and see if they can still, you know, see what their thoughts are. If they can still make it work, they can still apply for grants, and then we can tweak or throw it out from there. But I'm comfortable with that, because again, I'd hate to speak for them not knowing what they can or cannot work with.
And we'll get them a copy of that, so that you can try it beforehand, so they're not just getting it on the night, so.
I'm okay with that as long as advocates come to the table and we discuss.
Yeah, well, I think
And they were made
should be
aware
here,
that tonight,
sure.
just weather and scheduling was the issue.
Yeah, they
right?
all are all over the place,
Yeah.
traveling.
So they definitely have been included.
All right, so we'll move on. Had nothing?
Enough
Yeah,
cat
where we
talk.
going? Okay. Item 4 is an appointment of one member to the Civil Service Commission for an unexpired term ending on the 1st of Monday in April of 2020. Somebody like to nominate Dave Engstrom?
Yeah, I'll move to nominate Mr. Extra.
Second.
So, okay, we call for him. It's Dave Engstrom as the, would be the, filling in the unexpired term. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Item 5 is a recommend approval for issuance of a beer and liquor licences by the Iowa Department of Commerce for the following: renewal of Class C beer permit, Class B wine permit, and Sunday sales at Jolla General Store, number 2421 at 814 Superior Street. And B is a renewal of a Class B native wine permit at Heart and Home at 423 Superior Street. Call for motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Item 6 is a motion setting a time and place for a public hearing for 2018-2019 capital improvement budget and the 2018-19 through 2022-2023 capital improvement plan on March 5th at 5:40 p.m.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Item 7 is a motion setting time and place for a public hearing on proposed 2018 to 2019 budget at March 5th at 5:45 p.m.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Item 8 is a resolution directing publication of gross wage salaries for full-time and part-time city employees for the calendar year of 2017.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's something we do every year. Of course, it's an annual thing, so.
I did notice mine was missing a couple zeros.
That's wrong.
They got off when you're on the front.
We have budget constraints, so
Good one. Touche.
all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Number 9.
9 is a resolution approving a police department work agreement for 2018 to 2021 and approving the execution of same by the city manager. Daniel, do you want to
Sure.
talk on that one?
This is a collective bargaining agreement with the members of the police union. So the key parts of the agreement is it's a 3-year agreement effective July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2021. It provides for wage increases and for the first year of 3% and 2.25% each year after that. We also are permanently implementing a shift to 12-hour scheduling. We had adopted that on a temporary basis to accommodate the scheduling when we were down a few officers. The officers liked the schedule. It seemed to work well for management and administration of working out the schedule, so both sides agreed it was mutually beneficial, and we've adopted that as part of this agreement. There's some additional changes with regards to overtime to reflect some of the changes that would be accrued based on a 12-hour shift versus a normal 8-hour shift, and just clarify some other items related to vacation and comp time accrual as well, relating to that change. So.
Okay, call for motion. Bless you.
Move to approve.
Was that the motion? Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Item 12 is a motion accepting goal session report for 2018. Hold on that one at all.
Earlier this year, in the beginning of January, the council met with Jeff Schott from the University of Iowa to conduct our annual goal setting session. It was a little bit earlier than, trying to find it first. There you go.
Seems they can, at home you can see that clearer than you can see us. It's a good thing, I think.
So the goal setting session, as I mentioned, we had back in January, first part of January, council met with myself, our city attorney, our city clerk, and so most of our department heads to go over the goals. We reviewed the previous goals from the previous year, kind of outlined where things stood, and then the council identified some key goals or priorities for the upcoming year 1 and 2. Let me get to the actual adopted areas. While there are a number of ongoing projects or obligations that were identified in the past, these are some of the new ones that the council emphasized moving forward. Move that to full view. So things such as the 4 priorities or goals adopted by the council at the time were to identify and develop a plan for implementation, financing, and marketing of amenities to attract new residents and keep current residents in Webster City. This is to include more bike trails to Kendall Young Park and in and around town, potential for camping at Kendall Young Park, Two is develop a plan for funding the completion of Second Street. This is the portion of essentially from Prospect clear to Overpass Drive. Number three was adopt an ordinance conduct commercial occupancy inspections annually. This was something that Fire Chief Stansfield discussed at the town hall meeting. Okay.
Somebody's zooming you in.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay. Develop a plan to increase staffing, including not only police and fire, but also discussion was more broadly across the city organization. So those were the four priorities of the council, kind of identified as things to look at more closely in the upcoming year. We've started at least with the first part. Council heard at the last meeting from our community vitality director on plans to go through a rebranding process, and that'll culminate in the development of a new city website, and part of that come a marketing strategy and branding strategy for the city, as well as with a new logo. So I know the council had discussed or brought up the notion of reviewing these priorities periodically, perhaps on a quarterly basis, whether that be at a town hall meeting and or during a work session. So we'll kind of see what's the best approach to kind of do that depending on the topic and time frame for discussion. So how's that?
Okay.
I don't know if anyone can hear me out there, but I really appreciate, like last year and this year, Daniel, you including the department heads in this process. The first 3 or 4 times we went down this exercise, it was just kind of the council and city manager, and we ironed some stuff out. But bringing the department heads in on this is a great way to work with them and get their input they see day to day. So I really appreciate that. I think some great goals have come out of the last couple of years because of that tweak to the process. And I'm proud of our goal list.
Well, a lot of things happening in town, so he's making it easy for us to make us look good, I guess. Make us look like we're doing more maybe than we are. I don't know. But we live in, I'm glad we're here now anyway, so.
I move to approve the goal session report.
You're accepting it.
Or I move to accept.
Accept.
Sorry. Guess we already approved it.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
I have so many choices that
Motion approved, yes.
Could have pre-filled it out.
Okay, item D is reports and recommendations of the officers, boards and commissions. The following items have been deemed to be non-controversial routine actions to be approved by the council in a single motion. If a council member or a member of the audience wishes to have an item removed from this list, it will be considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. 1 is a motion to accept City Manager January reports, electric, wastewater, water, electric year-to-date and water year-to-date. A motion to accept Police Department January report. A motion to accept Fire Department January report. Council Committee reports. Other reports and recommendations.
I move to approve 1, 2, and 3 collectively.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion approved. Item E is closed session. Meet in closed session, discuss the purchase, sale of particular real estate only where premature disclosure could be reasonably expected to increase the price of a government or body would have to pay for that property as provided by Chapter 21.5J of the Code of Iowa. So we're going into closed session. Thanks, everybody.
I need a motion.
We have a
Motion to
motion.
move into closed session.
Second.
All those in favour say aye.
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 Opposed?